Now, as the African Continental Free Trade Area Treaty takes shape in African countries, experts have begun to highlight the potential challenges that lie ahead, including transitional costs associated with the treaty implementation. Among these challenges are revenue losses that could arise due to lower tariffs. These could strain countries' fiscal resources and, in some cases, threaten national budgets and the delivery of services to citizens. Experts have emphasized the need for African governments to find alternative sources of revenue, and to do so, they may need to introduce measures that would improve tax collection, increase compliance, reduce tax evasion, and expand the tax base. Now, this segment, Taxing Africa, is powered by West African Tax Administration Forum. And joining me from Abuja, Nigeria, is Emmanuel, Senior Advisor, International Corporate Taxation, ICRICT. It's nice to have you join us, Emmanuel, on the show.
Thank you. Good morning, Africa. Good to be back.
All right, now AfCFTA is primarily about cross-border trades, and now we're seeing discussions around improving taxes on the continent. So what does these particular agreements have to do with taxes?
Thank you very much. As you rightly pointed out, the African Continental Free Trade Area Agreement, AfCFTA, seeks to establish a single market for the whole of Africa. Now, that is considered significant because in terms of participating jurisdictions, it will be considered the single largest market in the world because 54 countries in Africa will be participating with a combined GDP of around 3.4 trillion. It will also cover around 1.2 billion people, which is around 16% of global population. And in essence, it seeks to remove tariff and non-tariff barriers to intra-African trade, which is the elephant in the room. Considering that intra-African trade at the moment, it stands at around 17%, compared with Asia, which is at around 59%, and Europe, which is 70%. The practical implication is that for every $100 worth of trade that we carry on as Africans, it's only 17% that are retained in Africa between us and our neighbors, and the rest goes to other continents. In Europe, that will be $70. The implication of this in the real terms is that we are exporting employment opportunities to other countries, other continents, while we ourselves are lacking those in employment. So the implication is there. Now, what have it got to do with tax? Recall that I said the essence of it is to remove tariff barriers. Tariff barriers are primarily taxes. And that is why the protocol in trading goods and Article 3 stated specifically that member states should aspire to remove custom duties, which are taxes, on goods originating from other member states. Article 23 of the protocol on services also speaks of the need for member states to have more tax treaties within each other. This is primarily because double taxation historically is considered a major barrier to international trade. So if you are an MNE in one member state and you are doing business in another member state, an income you derive from such businesses are subject to tax both in the source state and the state where you are resident. That will discourage you from carrying on cross-border trade. So in that context, tax is relevant, and as we go on to the program, we will point out other elements why tax is very key to implementation of AfCFTA. Thank you.
All right, so now that you're saying that AfCFTA would remove taxes, would take away tax barriers, now does that mean that there won't be taxation at all when African countries begin to trade with each other? Because we're looking at how this will mitigate transitional costs.
It's not exactly right to say there won't be taxes at all. The agreement itself recognizes that there will be taxes. The only thing that taxes that constitute trade barriers will be eliminated. And the elimination is only in respect of goods originating from African member states. So if you are imported goods from outside the continent and you are bringing it from one member state to another member state, it will be taxed just as usual. Again, if, for instance, the taxes that will still be applicable in ordinary course of business will still apply in respect of things like trading services, investment, and intellectual property. Because Article 25 of the protocol is very clear. It states that the taxes in member states will continue to apply to those trades. And it makes sense, of course, because those elements of trade are not such that go through your borders. So your domestic tax laws in different jurisdictions in Africa will continue to apply. So it's not exactly true to say that taxes will no longer be applicable. However, taxes that seems to deter trade, like taxes at the border, customs and excise, with respect to goods originating from member states, will be eliminated.
All right, so having said that, and still talking about tax, as it were, how should businesses interested in trading under the AfCFTA prepare themselves for this new, of course, phase of full implementation of the AfCFTA and the taxes that would accrue with it?
Thank you very much. So for entities or companies interested in doing business under the AfCFTA, there are tax considerations which they must take into cognizance. One, they have to understudy the agreement itself with emphasis on the tax element of the agreement. How does it impact on the supply chains when you say tariff will be removed or reduced with respect to a particular trade, a particular element of trade? Or what does it mean to them if they are trading in services? All right. If they are trading in goods, what kind of product qualified for the preferential tax treatment under the agreement? So all these issues and other basic things they must understand, first and foremost. Then secondly, they must look at their tax strategies. How does their strategy pan out under the new arrangement, under the agreement? Do they need to rejig it? What must they do to take advantage of the preferential treatment, the tax treatment of certain element of trade under the agreement? Now, in doing that, it may be relevant for them to consult professionals, both at the very high and low level, depending on the size of their MNE. It will also be relevant for companies that are now operating in multi-jurisdictions to consider their transfer pricing practices. They have to pay attention to transfer pricing regulation in member states, as well as the documentation requirement. And again, they have to consider the network of tax treaties with a view to establishing how they could take advantage of double taxation agreement existing between member states. So basically, these and many other considerations are very necessary for the MNEs to comply, because compliance is very, very important for you as an entity to survive in international trade. You need to comply in all the jurisdictions where you have your presence, and in doing that, you have a ticket to ensure that your business thrives within the free market.
All right. All right, now that you have talked about the peculiarities of this tax administration, and of course, under the fact that it will be embedded, or it is embedded in the AfCFTA, let's look at the establishment of the Pan-African Payment and Settlement System, which aims to simplify cross-border payments and, of course, reduce taxation costs. Now, could this particular system also make it easier for businesses to comply with tax administration or with tax regulations?
Well, the way I see it, the PASS platform is primarily to facilitate payments. Of course, it's going to eliminate some imminent risks which are associated with forex exchanges and fluctuations in the context of trade, but it's not a tax collection platform. So to that extent, it would only have indirect impact on tax collections and not a direct one. However, what we have advocated is for countries around Africa to develop an online-based tax compliance platform which enables entities doing businesses across our different jurisdictions to comply with taxes without necessarily coming with boots on ground to come and file fiscal papers and do all that. So the world has moved towards digitization, and that digitization must also now apply to tax administration. So if you have a platform online that will enable me to file my VAT returns if I'm in trading services and I have the VAT liability in the countries other than my own, you are facilitating trade to that extent. And that's more or less which direction we will be going. So that would be my response to that question. Thank you.
All right, still talking about tax comprehension, most especially by these African countries. Now, is there a correlation between poor tax policy administration and poor intra-Africa trades? And would there be a need for the creation of new policies or probably an upgrade on the existing ones, which could make it enough for these tax systems to be more comprehensive and, of course, more easy to be internalized into tax administration and, of course, African businesses?
Thank you very much. Let's just be noted that prior to now, most tax administration in Africa have seen their core function as collection of taxes. But under the AfCFTA, there will be only two caps. One cap is that of tax administrator, a tax enforcer, and a collector. The other one will be that of trade facilitator. So if you administer your taxes in a manner that impedes trade, you will have to reform it, you have to rejig it, you have to ensure that not only are you generating revenue for government, but you are doing it in such a manner that encourages businesses, makes it easier for businesses to comply with lower cost of compliance, among others. And again, you are right. There is an outright correlation between poor tax policy and tax administration, and of course, a lack of trade amongst our member states, which I have said to be in a very low ebb. Now, take the case of double taxation, for instance. We do not have a lot of double taxation agreements among ourselves as Africa. Taking Nigeria as an instance, Nigeria have around about 15 tax treaties with countries across the world. Okay. And only one with one country in Africa, that is South Africa. So that's not enough. The rest of Africa, Nigeria do not have tax treaties. Tax treaties facilitate trade to the extent that it ensures that those companies, the income they derive from cross-border trade are not subject to tax twice. And when you don't do that, it means that if a company earns $100 from inter-border trade, that company may be subject maybe to 30% in the source state and 30% when it gets home. That leaves the company with little or no income to reinvest in its business operation and to encourage it to continue to engage in international trade. All right. So this is a practical case, and there are much more instances.
All right, so we are just going to peg the conversation here and pick it up some other time. But then thank you so much, Emmanuel, Senior Advisor, International Corporate Taxation, ICRICT, for joining us on the show.
Thank you for having me.